This video is intended to demonstrate the proper and safe operations and maintenance of the Wintech DW series electric deck winch. Always operate, inspect, and maintain this winch in accordance with Wintech's Operation and Maintenance Manual, supplied with every winch, as well as American National Standards Institute Safety Code, ANSI B30.7, and any other applicable safety codes and regulations. Remove all loads from the winch. Isolate the winch electrically by pulling fuses, opening circuit breakers, and disconnecting wires from the power source. Lock out and tag out motor controller and power source. Only allow service personnel trained in maintenance and operation of the equipment to perform maintenance. During the course of operation, the chain on the DW may stretch and require tightening. To check the chain tightness, first remove top cover. Shift the chain side to side. The chain should shift about 1/2 to 1 chain pitches side to side, which is about 5/8 or 1 1/4 inch. If the chain can shift greater than 1 1/4 inch total, then the chain must be tightened. To tighten the chain, first loosen the 4 nuts that secure the gearbox to the top plate using a 15/16 open-ended wrench for the DW30 and DW40, or a 1 1/8 open-end wrench for the DW65 and the corresponding socket wrench. Next, loosen the 2 adjustment rod jam nuts on the inside of the gearbox. Now tighten the 2 adjustment nuts on the outside of the gearbox to push the gearbox back on the top plate. While tightening these nuts, periodically check the chain tightness level as explained in the video earlier. Once the chain tightness is at an acceptable level, re-tighten the 2 adjustment rod jam nuts. Finally, tighten the 4 nuts at the feet of the gearbox to secure gearbox to top plate and lock in chain tightness. With the top guard removed, first locate the master link and cotter pins on the chain assembly. With pliers and a hammer for assistance, remove the 2 cotter pins that secure the master link and set aside. Disassemble the master link by tapping the pins of the master link and use a flathead screwdriver to pry master link apart. Remove the front master link plate. Next, pull the remaining master link section back out of chain. The chain is no longer a single connected assembly. Pull one end of the chain up off the sprocket and feed open end down through the top plate. While supporting the chain, pull the other end up off the sprocket and feed end through top plate. Remove chain through front of winch. First, remove the top guard. Unlatch the 2 rubber latches that secure the guard to the winch. Using the handles provided in the guard, lift the guard up and off the winch. Set aside in a safe location. Remove the motor brake release lever by using a crescent wrench or a 1/2 inch open-ended wrench and unscrew from brake. Remove the 4 pan head screws that secure the fan cover to the motor using a 3 mm Allen wrench. Once 4 screws removed, pull the fan cover off the motor until it clears the brake. With the fan cover removed, the brake coil is now accessible. Apply a thin strip of duct tape around the end bell and spacer plate on the back of the motor. This will make lining up everything when reassembling much easier. Locate the 3 socket head cap screws that hold the brake coil to the motor. Loosen these cap screws using a 6 mm Allen wrench. Be sure to support the coil as you remove the Allen screws, as the coil is not adequately supported by the motor without the cap screws. Once the 3 cap screws are removed, pull brake coil back off the motor and place in a secure location. Note, the coil will still be wired into the motor junction box. With the brake coil removed, the brake pad is now accessible. To replace the brake pad, simply slide the old brake pad off of the splined hub and slide the new brake pad onto the splined hub. There is no air gap to set, making this process much simpler. Always clean the brake coil friction surfaces and the spacer plate surface before installing new pad. If the brake pad is glazed but still thicker than 1/2 inch, then the brake pad surface can be sanded and cleaned and the brake pad can be reused. To reinstall the brake coil, first align the spacer plate on the back of the motor so the 3 holes line up and duct tape to the motor. Install the brake pad by sliding the pad onto the brake hub with the pad side towards the motor. Next, insert one of the socket head cap screws into the brake coil and hold coil up against the spacer plate. Ensure that the O-ring in the coil is seated properly. Rotate the coil to make sure the brake handle pointing the correct direction. Align the cap screw with the proper hole and start tightening by hand to secure brake. Repeat for the other 2 bolts. Using the Allen wrench, work around the 3 bolts and tighten. Slide the fan cover onto the motor and make sure that the slot for the brake release lever is in the correct orientation. Align the 4 mounting holes and insert the pan head cap screws and start them in by hand. Work around the 4 cap screws and tighten with a 4mm Allen wrench. Insert the brake release rod through the fan cover slot and into the brake. Using a crescent wrench or an open end wrench, tighten the brake release rod into the brake. To remove the drive shaft bearing, first remove the 4 1/2-inch hex head cap screws using a 3/4 inch socket with a wrench or impact drill. Once all 4 cap screws are removed, insert 2 of the cap screws in the threaded jack bolt holes provided in the bearing housing. Tighten jack bolts as needed to assist the removal of the bearing housing from the side plate. Support the bearing housing as you tighten the jack bolts and remove bearing housing. To install a new bearing housing on the drive shaft, line up the bearing housing with the bore in the winch side plate. The drive shaft might need to be supported and moved so that the housing will slide over the shaft and into side plate bore. Note, if your bearing has a grease fitting, make sure this is oriented at the top. Once bearing housing lined up and partially inserted into the side plate, install and tighten the 4 1/2-inch hex head cap screws using a 3/4 inch socket with a wrench or impact gun. Tighten in a crisscross pattern to ensure the bearing is seated and installed evenly and flush with the side plate. With the gear side bearing and the chain removed, slide the drive shaft through the open bearing hole until the dog end is clear of the bearing. Angle the shaft out of the front of the winch and remove the shaft. With the gear side bearing and the chain removed, angle the shaft into the front of the winch and insert the gear side through the open bearing hole. Insert the dog end into the bearing. While supporting the drive shaft to align, reinstall gear side bearing. To remove the cluster gear or drum shaft, first remove the 3/4 inch shaft keeper cap screw using an 1 1/8 socket with a wrench or impact. To assist in removal, remove 2 of the 1/2-inch bearing cap screws. Install on the 2 jack bolt holes provided in the shaft keeper plate. Tighten those bolts to remove the cluster gear shaft. Note, the cluster gear or drum must be supported while the shaft is being removed. If the mounting location of the winch makes it difficult to remove the cluster gear shaft or the drum shaft from one side, the shaft keeper plate can be removed and used on the opposite side of the winch. When the winch is supplied power to remove shaft keeper, power is first remove the 2 3/4 inch shaft keeper. This energizes the alternate socket with a wrench. Power operation is stopped. Remove shaft keeper. Removed. The brake is on the other side of the winch. Remove the shaft keeper motor from turning, and the manual operation instead of hold the load. Note when the shaft keeper or follows shaft removal. You should hear a clank as heard in the video. Thank you for watching this DW Series winch operation and maintenance video. For any more information, or if you have any questions, please contact Wintech and we will be more than happy to help.